Phillip, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want in this pool.
Get in the pool.
I'm not messing up.
Is it cold, fellas?
Nah, it's good.
It's not that bad, right? Every time a thing.
My watch is on, though.
Yeah, it's counting.
You're over here.
Wow.
No, you're over here.
Whoa. This is dumb as shit.
It is dumb. It's taking so long.
Wow. All right, so now, hey, we'll have a break.
We just gotta hurry.
We'll do a break and then we'll go.
Nah, make him get right into
You
it.
want him to get right into it.
All right, guys. This is the Built by Vitality podcast. I'm your host, Steve Pinkerton. I'm with Phillip who?
Lewis.
Okay. And we have a guest today, and that guest is Corey LaJoie. He is a NASCAR sprint, or no.
Now it's just NASCAR.
Now it's just NASCAR Cup Series, and you've been doing that for how long?
This will be my 4th year, heading into 21.
So Corey texted me the other day and said, hey, what do I got to do to get in your podcast? And I was like, dude, you're in. Let's go. And he said, I think we want to talk about.
No, you said, what topics should we talk about?
Yeah. I said, what topics? And what did you
Getting
say?
comfortable, being uncomfortable.
And what did I
He
say?
said, love it. Half hour went by. He says, bring your shorts. So that was Tuesday afternoon. So every time I jumped in the shower between Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, like we are right now, I was taking freezing cold showers, assuming that this is what we would be doing.
Oh, God, you are so long-winded.
Is it better than you thought or worse than you thought? What do you think?
It's worse. Yeah, it's but people watching are like, oh yeah, they were sitting in the pool.
Yeah.
It's freezing.
So the current temp's 42 degrees, and we've been adding in some contrast stuff. They've been doing that for a while, and now that we've got a hot tub and we can have access to that, we can go hot tub for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can get cold plunge. And now that it's frosty in the morning,
This is just insane.
it gets at about 42, 43 degrees.
So cold.
We'll stay in here for about 4 more minutes.
All right, guys, tune in for next episode.
Phillip's funeral from hypothermia.
So Phillip, can you talk about some of the logistical challenges you've had with setting this up on the outside?
They were.
What was that?
They were just in a hurry, and I had to make sure I got the shot. Oh God, I just.
So Phillip, can you explain what's going on in the background?
No, I'm not moving it.
They're treading. Well. Oh.
That's cold.
So we thought what we could do is we bring the coaches with us. I've got Brent, Nate, and Spence behind me, and I told them they could just kind of tread water a little bit and hang out with us, and we'll do the first 6 to 8 minutes of the program in the pool.
Yeah.
And then we'll
Getting
transition
comfortable,
back.
being uncomfortable. Steve's channeling his inner buds right now.
But here's the cool part about this topic.
The cool part, yeah.
Some people say that it could be getting comfortable, being uncomfortable through fitness. There's a number of different stimulus you can choose to get the result of being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's no difference between, in my opinion, the stress response from doing a super hard workout and what it does to your body and what it does to your brain trying to comprehend how to speak and articulate and communicate, or jumping into a really, really cold pool and getting the stress response that way.
Or firing off a 3,400 pound race car.
Exactly.
I think this is thickening in my blood.
So my point to Corey would be, man, I would imagine you've got to believe things like this would help you when you get to the track, right?
It's just a mental block, right? It's like if these sumbitches would shut up, we'd probably have a good podcast. It's like your brain thinks your body's only capable of going so far.
It is.
And doing dumb stuff like this is what makes you realize that you can go way further.
And I think the more you can get comfortable with all of this, so maybe because Corey drives a piece of steel 190 to 210 miles around the track, maybe he's better at this than other people would be that don't have that stress. So I think it's a really interesting conversation that I think a lot of people will.
It's so cold.
All right, Talkie McGee, let's get it.
So what we're going to
We'll
do,
zoom right into the old next setup.
we got a couple minutes here. What we'll do is we're going to transition out and we'll go to a little bit warmer setting and we'll get into that and we'll talk about how Corey trains, how he preps, what his mindset is. Because again, I think mindset, how you approach this is everything. Wouldn't you agree, Phillip?
This is the dumbest thing ever.
So right now,
Get your out of breath. Well, when I brought up the topic of getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, everybody wants to talk about it. Yeah. Right?
Nobody wants to do it.
Nobody wants to be about it. But that's also the guys that I race against every week, they are not shivering in this cold ass pool. God, it's cold.
Steve, if I can get out now, I'll never eat Zaxby's again, I promise.
All right, so we'll cut right there.
Yeah.
And we'll go a minute together in the middle. Let's go. A minute together. All right, let's just hang out here. We got about a minute here, but we got to come. We'll all tread water for a minute. Yeah. Come on, Andy boy. Just tread it.
Philip, get on track.
Come on, we tread it. We tread it. Think about that hot tub.
One side of my neck was tighter than the other. Like it's.
I bet you still good.
I don't know.
All right. We good? Yeah, we're good. All right, let's go shower.
Touchdown.
All right, guys, we are back with the Built by Vitality podcast. We're warmed up.
Oh, so much warmer.
That's subjective. I'm shivering, so my jaws.
Yeah, Steve said it's bad if we get warm again.
So
Don't want to get too warm, you know?
If I let Philip sit in the hot tub until he was warm, we'd be doing this podcast tonight at about 9:30 p.m.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really interesting podcast because we're going to get into Corey's background and we're going to get into how some of it's evolved and how some of it's changed. So before I get too far into that, I want Corey to talk about how he got into racing, because when you think about it, it's one of those things where there's 43 people that can do that sport. 43 people are in the Cup Series.
40 actually. It used to be 43.
Now it's 40.
Now they keep chopping her down.
It's crazy. So you're talking about 40 people that get the chance to drive a Cup car around these tracks. So I want to know how this came about and the journey that it's taken you on.
Yeah, so racing's kind of in the bloodline, right? So my grandfather raced in Connecticut. He was kind of the Northeast guy. But back then you could actually race on a Saturday night and provide a living and still work a job, right? You didn't have to pursue it as a career. My dad got into it naturally, started racing against my grandfather, had some success, but if you wanted to make some money at it, you had to move south. So late 80s, he moved down from Connecticut to Charlotte to start pursuing a career and just did the grind for several years, worked for some different people, and finally got his opportunity to kind of show what he was capable of doing in the mid-90s in what's now the Xfinity Series. What used to be called the Busch Series. So he ended up winning 2 championships back then, and I was 4 at the time. So I started to making a little more money and stuck me in a go-kart, and I looked like Marvin the Martian with the little white helmet with the little 2 legs sticking out. I got some good old pictures, but just kind of since you're a little kid and your dad did it, your grandpa did it, you just started going. You just started doing it. And it hasn't been just a steady upwards trajectory. The life, no different than anybody in business. The trajectory's been up and down, but the overall pitch of my climb, if you will, has been upwards. And luckily I'm blessed enough. It'll be my 4th full-time season in the Cup Series here next year. And
man,
it's been a ride.
Now, how much time did you spend at the tracks when you were younger?
A lot, yeah. There's a Christian organization that travels with the series called Motor Racing Outreach. So pretty much all the drivers and the crew chiefs dump their kids off with these guys in the tents, and they got the toys and the scooters and the whole bit. So I grew up every weekend growing up with anybody's kids, right? Anybody that's between 2 years old and 9, that was our kind of group.
Yeah.
But it was also, my dad raced on Saturdays, not the Sundays, so I wasn't in the Cup garage like you see a guy like Chase Elliott. You see all the little pictures with him and Dale Earnhardt or Jeff Gordon. It was more of just a family deal. We'd load up in the motorhome, we'd go to the race and have fun. And some of my best memories are traveling the country, riding in the back seat of the motorhome. So that's certainly some memories I want to share with my kid one day.
I remember what's crazy is it was the first year that I opened CrossFit Vitality. I can't even tell you how it came about, but there was a rower that your dad had at the shop, and I was either dropping it off or picking it up. He was somehow in connection with a guy by the name of Greg Hammond, who is...
No, that's me. That's so I came about it, Greg Hammond. It was at Dad's shop. Guy Jim Leo, he owns Pit Fit in Indy.
Yeah,
He's
that's
big.
what it is.
He's big with say IndyCar guys and drag guys. He came down. He was kind of looking at putting a gym down here, brought a rower, ended up acquiring it. And, yeah, one thing led to another. I think he might have borrowed it from you type of deal. Like, hey, we need a rower.
So I gave it to him, and then I went to go pick it up, and I met your dad. Yeah. And your dad is man, he's like a larger than life. I mean, I'm a fairly above average guy, and he's got this presence about him. He carries himself as he's just a big.
You definitely hear him before you see him type of guy.
And I remember I was walking in, and I didn't really know where I was at, and I remember LaJoie seating, and I walked in, and I heard this voice, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Oh, geez, what do I do now?" And I turned around, and it was your dad.
Oh yeah,
nice guy, but you could just tell when you can tell when people command a room when they walk in, and he's someone that when he's talking, you're listening.
Yeah, so. He's one of those guys, and that's also why I enjoy hanging out with you. And I mean, you're like you said, you're one of those guys that can command a room too. The first time I met you, Philip, chime in whenever you feel like you want to say something. But you were working with Marcus Ambrose, right? So Marcus was driving for Richard Petty Motorsports. I was a quote unquote development driver for those guys. We went out to the Charlotte road course. He was dicking around with these little go-karts he was trying to like put together, right?
Yeah.
And you were there, and I don't know if you jumped on him or not, but him and I were like tweaking on him, right? He was in one, I was in the other. We were racing him to see which one was equal or not. And you and I got to BSing, and you're like, hey, stop by, right? And you were in the first building. You were where 26 Acres Brewery is now. And I come in, I started working out, I was probably 17.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, this stuff's like hard. I'm not sure that I want to, like, does this stuff really correlate to driving a race car?
This kind of goes along with Andy's podcast. He said the same thing.
Yeah.
He's like, when he first came,
he's
he was
a pastor.
like,
what's he got to work out for?
He's like, I don't think who would pay for this. What is this?
Did you really want to show up every week and just punish yourself?
Yeah.
But fast forward, and I started, there was a time where I wasn't driving anything, reverted back to crew chief in cars. I was flying out to Bakersfield, California every other week to crew chief a guy just to kind of pay the bills, and had nothing on the table in terms of driving. A company that I stayed in touch with more or less got me back into the fold and kind of started the snowball rolling down the hill. And one thing led to another. A couple of years of grinding got me to where I'm going to be my first really full-time competitive Cup Series ride here for 21.
Do you find that it's harder I think it's confusing for me from the outside in. I just don't know enough about it. The first time I watched a race was when I was training Marcus Ambrose. Yeah. When his assistant called me and said, hey, I want you to train one of my bosses is a NASCAR driver. I had no idea who he was, never watched a NASCAR race in my life. And when I started working with him, I really liked him. Super nice guy.
Marcus was a badass.
Man, he was just the most down-to-earth guy. And then I started to fall in love with racing because I got so competitive I wanted him to do well. I wanted him to win. I'll never forget when he won Watkins Glen. I don't know how many things I broke in my house when we were watching that race, but my
was
goodness.
That the race where Brad Keselowski and him were sliding over
the
the
end,
oh yeah,
the last turn? Race. Man, that was a great race. But then I started getting into it, and I started paying attention to what you guys go through. And then he took me out to the Richard Petty driving experience.
Yeah.
And he talked to one of the guys that was there and said, hey, make sure you make him feel what this is like. And I'll tell you, I think I was maybe 160 at Charlotte on one of the straightaways, and I was holding that steering wheel so hard I cramped in my biceps, my traps, my upper back. I couldn't move,
and
man.
that was 3 laps.
3 laps.
3 laps.
Imagine doing another 331 around there.
I'm telling you, when people, they don't understand the demands that driving those race cars have on your body. I mean, just
I
the
like
force.
Fords like that. It's good to see the big guy have trouble with something.
Oh man, and not to mention, I don't know. I'm not convinced that a race car is built for my frame. So when they shoved me in there, it was kind of like shoving a 10-pound thing of sausage in like one of those 5-pound.
The casing's about to bust.
I'm like trying to get in there and move around, and they're like, "Oh, you're good," and I'm like, "Okay, sounds good." And I mean, they put the wind. I don't know how that's legal. I don't know how the Richard Petty driving experience.
Well,
power to you, but
you just clip the seatbelts and just
let
them go.
Yeah. So anyway, but I think at that point I started to realize how incredible shape you had to be in to be successful in this sport. Not to mention Bristol, which we'll talk about in a second. But there was so many things that we could start doing that I could see could help him with his core, with just his hand-eye coordination. But more than anything else was just the mindset that he could have getting into those last handful of laps where it's always going to be hot. You're always going to be tired. You're just imagine focusing
for 4 hours.
For 4 hours. I mean, people can't focus for 30 seconds without picking up their phone and looking at Instagram, let alone 4 hours going 190 and you're 4 inches from the car next to you. What that does to your central nervous system must just be incredible. So when I started to see all this, man, it's very appealing to me to hear how people are training for this, how they're prepping their brain for this. I hear a lot of these drivers are running marathons or biking marathons or whatever it might be, and I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I just don't believe that is going to translate into anything on the track. Now, maybe the argument is simple that they're trying to let their mind go and that's how they relax, and that's fine if that's the case. But if they're looking for an edge on a last minute restart, I don't think running marathons is the answer.
No.
What do you think?
Well, because an Ironman or a marathon is a bucket lister for me, because eventually I want to do something that could just shut the self-preservation switch right off and get after it.
Sure.
But in terms of applying to the last late race restart, when you've been in it for 4 hours and the cockpit temperature is 155, 160 degrees, and then your average heart rate's been 160 for 3 hours, and you might get 3 cautions for a break, right? Like at that point in time, it's like, who wants it more?
Sounds like a good training for that would be a cold plunge.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that really is bad for anything. But it's also not good if you want to be if you're a warm-natured guy. But I think that things that I've learned is just doing things that push that horizon of what your mental capacity is, right? Because your brain only wants to do what you're comfortable with, and that was kind of the point we were talking about in the pool. It's like, how do you get comfortable being uncomfortable? It's just doing something that you're not used to doing, whether it's putting yourself in a different structure of your fitness, whether it's sitting for a little longer in the sauna, or doing something that you're not good at. Like lately, I got a VersaClimber rower for the house, and the first couple of times I jumped on that thing, it just opens you up, and I had no capacity, no output on it, and it's like, okay, I suck at the VersaClimber. You know what? That's all I'm going to do for the next couple of times. I'm going to hit the VersaClimber, and sure enough, right, you build that capacity, and it gets way more. Now I actually look forward to it. So that's just a small example of, I try to find areas that I'm not comfortable in, find weaknesses, and purposely work on those. And if my weakness, you can look statistically now, they have stats for everything. If my restart retention rate of the non-preferred groove is in the 70th percentile, hey, you know what? I got to work on that. Next time on the outside lane in Martinsville, you got to get on the wheel a little bit more, right? You want to retain that spot, bump up your average a little bit. So that's just some of the analytic stuff that's starting to seep into what I do a little bit more, that a lot of guys probably don't look at. But ultimately, I think those our race, my kind of motto, stacking pennies, you've probably seen it on Twitter a couple times. But like, when you don't have when you're not driving a race winning car, quote unquote, you have to find the small victories. If not, then you get beat down, right? So whether it's being in the top 5 in pit road rolling speeds, or having a couple good restarts where you beat a couple guys that you probably shouldn't, that's a penny on the stack. And you're not going to have people tweeting at you. You're not going to be popping champagne bottles over finishing 18th, but you got to realize that there are small victories in those days. That way you can keep pressing forward and keep getting another penny on the stack, and eventually you make a buck.
I think you talk about having these wins, these small wins, and the trap would be you're only gauging your progress based on an actual win. And if that's the case, now you're talking, that is a multi-year goal, and it's so easy to get derailed if you're constantly looking at it like, well, I didn't do well.
Run 20th. One of my favorite quotes, and I've been using it a little bit more and more, Booker T. Washington says, success shouldn't be measured by the place somebody's achieved. It should be measured by what you've overcome.
Booker T, the wrestler.
I wish it was Booker T, the wrestler.
Because I don't know who Booker T was. Booker T, I remember that guy. He was pretty good.
I'm sure he ripped off his name off that actual rope, Booker T. Washington. But that's so true, especially in a sport where you're so dependent on what you're driving, right? The horse I'm sitting on isn't a thoroughbred, right? It's something that this year is going to be the best I've ever driven in 21, but up prior, every car I've been driven, it's been a 15th to 25th place car, if not worse. So it's almost like, obviously a lot of people that are going to be listening to this podcast are CrossFit or fitness people. It's almost like, so that the objective is the same for everybody, right? We're trying to win the race, be the first car across the finish line. If you're in a CrossFit competition, it's almost as if you can be Rich Froning or Matt Fraser, but if you stuck an extra 100 pounds on his barbell for a 50 thruster workout, he's not going to win. Doesn't matter how good he is, right? Because you're at a disadvantage of what equipment and the tools you have to meet the objective. So with that being said, you have to be realistic on the tools you have to reach the objective, but you also have to make objective within that realistic expectation. So you got to be real with yourself. You can't be overly optimistic, because then it's just fake.
Setting yourself up for failure too,
Yeah. So, I think that in a lot of the ways I've made it way further than I expected to in my career, and I've overcome a lot of adversity. So, by my measurements, my competitive side, my competitive nature wants to be a cup champion. I feel like I'm capable of doing that. But as of right now, I'm going to try to figure out how to stack some more pennies. And
I love I love having the motto of stacking pennies. If you think about it, in any sport or business, let's say we use the gym world as an example. Everybody's doing the big things right. Everyone these days knows how to program. Everybody can generally run a class through a 60-minute workout. They get that. The little things, what you're talking about doing, are what separates everybody. Yep. Are they making sure that their customer service is the way it needs to be? Are they returning phone calls? Are they making sure the bathrooms are clean? Are they making sure the equipment is clean? Those things start to be the pennies and the separator from everybody else. And then now you can take that and say, okay, you take a guy like Spencer who wants to compete in CrossFit. Well, it used to be, I remember in 2010, I had double unders, and I've always been pretty decent at double unders. It was like, and when a double under workout came up, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be great, because so many people don't have double unders that are competing. They don't have good double unders. Now it's laughable if anyone thinks that double unders are going to be a separator among a competitive crew. So it just becomes like the standard has become so high that you've got to find these areas that you can have these little advantages, whether it be you're talking about pit road. Well, maybe that's my nutrition. Maybe that's sleep. Maybe it's all these different things that not everybody's doing. Now you get a little bit of an advantage, because the edge is everyone's got this generally the same ability level.
You got to find the areas you can make the most improvement. And this is really the first off season I've really been taking it serious. Usually from the week before Thanksgiving, when the season ends, to about 3 weeks before the season starts, I just mail it in, right? Yeah. Bulking season, quote unquote. So, I think that between now and when February 14th, the Daytona 500 rolls around, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. I'm eating better, working out hard. Now I kind of know the areas of really what matters in the car for longevity, for mental clarity in terms of just eating the right stuff in the car before the race. And it's easy to, and like we were talking about, I don't think it was on camera, but it's easy to look at something and be like, oh, well, that doesn't matter. But it does matter if nobody else is doing it. Nutrition matters if half the guys who are in front of you are winded or have mental fog for the last 100 laps of the race, and you can get on their ass for the last 50. Yep. Stuff like that. And it might not be every week. It might be once every 3 weeks, but I'd rather be the one that takes advantage of that 33% than somebody who doesn't.
Sure. You look at that and you say, okay, how easy is it to like you said, you can look at something that's uncomfortable and say, wow, that doesn't translate.
Right.
Like we talked
What's
about.
that got to do with driving into turn one at Bristol?
And
nothing.
How many people fall victim to that when we're inherently lazy. So we're looking for confirmation of any belief that makes it easier for us to make it through our day.
Absolutely.
And if that means Philip's like, ooh, you know what? I can't get in that pool today because
I tried to schedule all kinds of stuff not to get that thing.
it's just one of those things that the more decisions you can make that place you in that place you in that stimulus, I've got to believe transfer into whatever else. And you could tell someone, okay, maybe it's a teacher that I would convince to do a cold plunge because you know what? At 2:00 in the afternoon, when you've been dealing with 30 second graders all day long, what is the gap before I lose my mind? And can I expand that out to where I can now make it the whole day and not let my emotions get the best of me? I would argue that a cold plunge, some type of contrast training would be good for that. So you can't tell me any scenario where I think being uncomfortable doesn't make you better at what you do. But like Corey said,
no different than that scenario or anywhere. It's like being aware of when your brain is not focused and it's just like, ooh, how can I get out of this situation?
Yeah.
And then your heart rate gets out of control, your breathing gets out of control, which I think is the root of a lot of it. Knowing how to be aware of like, okay, my brain isn't focusing on the task at hand. It's figuring out how to get out of this particular situation.
Yep.
And there's been certain times where, you get racing with somebody really tight at a Bristol, at a Martinsville, where your elbows are up and you're really close to somebody. And, there's a lot of pressure on if it's late in the race. And you literally have to just control your breathing. It's usually, a 6 count in, 6 count out. And you almost need to like refocus, reprogram that. But if you're not aware, if you don't put yourself in positions to be aware of when your brain's like, get me the hell out of here, or I don't want to do this, or thinking about other things, then you'll never understand why it's doing that or why you think a certain way.
You need to train that way, or like when you're actually doing it, you're not going to.
That's why I love CrossFit. I mean, because so you use the marathon or Ironman analogy. And people who train that way, more power to them, whatever kind of floats your boat. But I do think that putting yourself, and I'll go back to the marathon, like it's almost like you're in an 85% capacity the entire time, right? When you need to turn the wick up, you're just used to going 85%, so there's not that extra little bit to get. Mm-hmm. I'd rather train a CrossFit style, Metcon style, and when you're sitting on the bike and you have Steve Pinkerton in your ear yelling at you,
20 seconds left, you know you got some more to give.
Yeah, and what you think you might be able to do 400 watts, and that big Viking son of a bitch is jawing at you, and you go to 500. Like that's where you need to try to go get it.
Well, I think anything that you do that I look at going running, a lot of people run because they can let their mind wander. I don't want to have. I wouldn't have Corey LaJoie doing anything training wise where his mind can wander, because he can't wander.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, there's 3 cautions. And that's the only time. And even then you're cycling the engine, you're doing all kinds of crazy stuff that you're not sitting there with your hand out the window. You know what I mean?
No.
So why would we train in a way that doesn't make sense to apply? Well, we do that because some drivers might be afraid of getting hurt. Some drivers might be afraid of, they just don't want to suffer, or they don't want to be uncomfortable. And that's like that in anything. But those are the things that they need to be doing.
Yeah.
And
if you don't look, there's lots of guys who look at it as if it's, you can be just good enough at it, right? And then you can put more stock into the caliber of car you drive, or the team that you drive for, as what your limitations are, which is true in a lot of the ways. But if you can't flip it around and say, okay, what are some areas, like I'm not Jimmy Johnson, I'm not Mario Andretti, right? I wasn't born with this astronomical amount of natural raw talent, but I'd like to think I have enough talent and enough work ethic to achieve. The only person that can limit what I could achieve behind the wheel would be myself, right? The 6 inches between your ears. So, it's just putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, and there's a reason why not a lot of people do it, because it's not fun, because it sucks. But the payoff, regardless if it's tangible or not, the payoff is just knowing that you beat yourself when you didn't want to do something?
Not to get too far in the weeds of the NASCAR community, but it was interesting listening to Marcus talk about, there's two types of drivers. There's drivers that grow up around the sport that spend a lot of time trying to get in, and there's drivers that bring a sponsor or they bring a financial part of it that gets them that opportunity that way. Is that accurate? That
there's probably a couple more avenues, but generally speaking, yeah.
Do you think that the people that don't grow up in it, that don't have those lows that you had, do you think that they're willing to do some of the things that you are willing to do?
I mean, that's generalizing a bit, but I think that if you don't know what your low is, or if you haven't had to scrape and claw to get out of whatever particular hole you're in, your ceiling is lower, right? Because you probably don't appreciate whatever particular opportunity that you've been given. You also don't want to necessarily put the work in because a lot of the stuff's been handed to you. And a lot of people ask, when I grew up racing as Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Bubba Wallace. We all grew up around here racing each other since we were 9 years old. And everybody asks, well, I was in the ESPN Next article with Kyrie Irving, right? It's like I was on the trajectory that those guys were. And then that 17 to 20 year window when I was 17 to 20, their trajectory skyrocketed where mine almost kind of petered out. And a lot of people ask, partially some of it was my immaturity and taking for granted some of the opportunities I was being given. But to Marcus's point of that's the crucial time where a financial backer or a partner can get you in the right teams or in the right cars to showcase your abilities. And I didn't necessarily have that. I had kind of one that I just let a 18-year-old, 19-year-old ego just blow that door for me, which ended up being a learning experience. But I wish I would have handled that a little bit different, which we all have certain things we probably would have handled a little bit different. But if I could have been, with a team Penske like Ryan Blaney or Hendrick like Chase, who knows what could have happened. But in hindsight, I wouldn't take it back. I wouldn't change it because it's just kind of built this the persistence and just the grit that I think is going to carry on, not just on the racetrack, off the racetrack. I mean, there's nothing that at this point in my life if I want to do something, I'm just going to bear down to figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think your mindset is? How is it different from the way you treated the training from the 16-year-old Corey LaJoie to now? What do you think's changed the most?
Yeah, so I think that the older we get, or the older I get, I realize a lot more of it's mental than it is physical. Because I can be in the best shape, but if I go to a race and I'm in the dumps or you don't like a particular track, so you kind of psych yourself out. The mental aspect can hold you back just as much as being out of shape, right? Or being malnutrition or whatever it is. So there's lots of which I thought when I was 16 visualizing was stupid. And it still sounds kind of dumb to say, but all these I started reading all these studies on Olympic athletes. Shaun White visualizing his run, and he can legitimately down to the second say, hey, go, slide down the vert ramp and know within a couple tenths of a second how long it takes in his mind versus real life. And you watch back some different things. Ayrton Senna was one of the best F1 drivers of all time. Lewis Hamilton now is. And those guys can know within a couple seconds of a 2.5 minute lap, corners, shift, and stuff like that. So I started taking that a little more serious. Now, every lap is going to be different. Conditions change. Cars on the racetrack change. But generally speaking, just preparing, watching more film, knowing kind of caution tendencies, and just I guess more preparation on the mental side to know what to expect. That way you don't get into battle and be like, oh, I didn't expect that to come, and not know how to and I think that comes with experience as well. But preparation, certainly I take a lot more serious now than I did.
How much do you put into it? I think that the other component of your job, which is very interesting, is the relationship component with sponsors, with your commitments on TV, radio, all that type of stuff. I mean,
crew chief. I mean, my crew chief relationship is tougher to manage than my wife.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like a working relation, because you do have an out, right? He can badmouth me and get me fired, or I can badmouth him and get that's a tough relationship. Could be great. I mean, you can point at Jimmy Johnson, Chad Canals. Those guys didn't necessarily love each other all the time, but they had a working relationship and they had good communication. So the guy who's crew chief for me last year at the 32 car is coming with me next year, just because I know the kind of guy he is. He's fiery. He says some things in the heat of the battle that he probably regrets. I say some things because we both are trying to press forward to the same goal, and we both keep each other accountable. That's the kind of people that I want to surround myself with, because the relationship point is something that probably goes a little bit more under the radar than it should, because the on-track product every Sunday afternoon is just the tip of the iceberg. All the other stuff, having a good relationship with your crew guys, certainly the sponsors are what keeps the tires on the car, literally and figuratively. I've had a couple great partners that continue to build their investments. They just, for whatever reason, they just like me, and I keep a good relationship. If they need something, I'm always picking up the phone. So when you're trying to be a spokesperson and ambassador for multi-millions of dollars every year, but you're also trying to make yourself better as an athlete, that's also something that makes NASCAR unique, because LeBron James doesn't necessarily care about endorsing a water bottle or a water company. He's trying to make his jump shot better, or whatever the case may be. You have to weigh both sides as a competitor, but also as an ambassador, to keep the wheels turning.
You can see, at least from a spectator perspective, you can see guys that do that really well that I would imagine would be great for sponsors to work with, and then you can see other people that I can imagine probably don't do well on the sponsor side.
There's lots of guys that I'm sure the sponsors can pull their hair out occasionally, and Kyle Busch and I are buddies, but I think he's an easy one to pick on sometimes, because he's the villain. Yeah. And he embraces the role, and he's actually, NASCAR would probably suck if Kyle Busch wasn't around. And there's probably a lot of times where M&M's is like, ooh, I wish you didn't say that, Kyle, or I wish you didn't do that, Kyle Busch, because M&M's is a child-centered brand, and Kyle Busch doesn't do something that, it might be safe for kids to watch every now and then, but he's such a good race car driver, so talented that, it kind of offsets. So if you have that much ability and you're winning races, it's easier. You got a little more rope in terms of saying some bad things or whatever the case may be. But you look at a guy like Jimmy Johnson, who retired this past year, and he set the bar. Yeah. He was, in my opinion, the greatest driver of all time on the racetrack, but also greatest to the fans, greatest to his partners. And he's also, he could sit here and have a whiskey and BS until the cows come home. He's just one of those guys that so unique, because for a guy who has all the money in the world, all the success in the world, all the trophies that you could ever want, and you wouldn't know him if you wouldn't know he had a dollar to his name, because he's just one of the boys. Yeah, I think that we talk about humility a lot and being humble, and you don't find that as much as you used to. And I think when you do, I think it stands out so much, because it's not there. It's not prevalent all the time anymore. Well, everybody thinks that you're as famous as what your Instagram follower count is, right? And it's like, at the end of the day, man, you gotta be a good person to the people in your community and in your own home, right? You got to get your home in order before you start working on everything else. So, Where do you see, we'll end this with, I've been doing this with Marcus for a couple years. I was with him, and now for the last 5 years, I've been with Chip Ganassi Racing, training their pit crews, which should be very interesting now. Yeah, we got those guys. Yeah, so that means you'll come over and do some training with those guys who I've watched them evolve over the years, but I'm slowly starting to get, kind of more educated in this. Where do you see NASCAR going? I was worried about it a year or two ago. Once, Dale Jr. retired, now you got Jimmy Johnson retiring. Do you feel like NASCAR's losing some momentum, or do you feel on the inside out, do you think? I think the opposite a little bit. It's a big blow over the past 4 or 5 years. You can count Dale Jr., Carl Edwards, Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart. I mean, all those guys are the bulk of the fan base in terms of merchandise sales, right? So when you lose that, it's certainly a blow that you have to recover from. But at the end of the day, if somebody likes the sport of racing, they're going to tune in and find their guy, right?
They're going to find someone new.
Yeah, and I hope, and you also people want to pull for guys that win, right? It's no fun pulling a guy that runs 25th every week. So I want to get to a point where people are excited to see how I run, which should be, I'm looking forward to next year with some better motors and cars. And my fan base is growing just organically, right? Because people see I'm kind of a normal guy. I've got my podcast that people can listen to every week. So like just growing it kind of from the foundation, that way everybody's like, oh, yeah, we know who he is. We know what kind of person he is. That way when I combine, when the competition curve can meet what the off-track brand has been, is really when my stuff's going to take off. But in terms of NASCAR overall, there's the new car essentially. Mm-hmm. It's called Next Gen car. It's pretty much 1,000% different than what we have now. It's trying to be more like taking what we have now. It's like a 1978 Monte Carlo. So eventually the Toyotas of the world, Ford and Chevy wouldn't be able to justify dropping $100 million a year into a 1980 Camaro, like developing that besides just the body skin. And that's what we have now. So NASCAR is trying to push it to a little more hybrid technology in terms of the power plant, and also make the suspension a little more relative to what's on the road today. And I think that'll bring some new manufacturers in, Honda, Volkswagen, some other people are looking at coming in. So that'll be an influx of cash. And NASCAR is in a good place for their TV deal, which the TV deal ultimately makes the entire sport roll. And I think that there's a big need for live sports. Everybody's streaming everything anymore, right? Netflix, Hulu, we all have them. But people want to watch a race live, and they do have that card. And I think generally speaking, the guys who are growing their brand on the track, Chase Elliott's, bigger. He's eventually going to be bigger than what Dale Jr. Was in the sport, because he now just won his championship. So that stuff is usually what adds gas to the fuel to that fire. So I think overall, man, I think NASCAR is trending upwards. It's cool to see a lot of the athletes coming from other sports like football, training, getting in the pit crews like Ganassi, Penske. It's going to be a good outlet in the future for those guys to even start another career. So I've been lucky, man. Hopefully I can stick around for another 10 years or so.
So talk to me about where people can find your podcast and now your website, all that. Where can they go to do all that?
Yeah, so I got all the stuff: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Corey LaJoie. My podcast, we just finished it after 2 years, called Sunday Money.
Sunday Money, I love it.
Yeah, that was actually a little tip of the cap to Dale Earnhardt's yacht that he bought, was called Sunday Money. So kind of like a under the radar. If you didn't really know, that was the reason why we named it that. But we're talking to NASCAR.com. We'll probably do another podcast on their platform next year just to stay relevant. I enjoy doing it. I love talking about what I do every week. I feel like other people enjoy it for whatever reason, listening to me talk about it. So try to continue that and start running good and stacking some more pennies.
I love it. Well, we're excited to see you back in the gym with us, and then at Daytona in February, right?
February 14th, Daytona 500. Tune in. 7-car.
Maybe we'll do a cold plunge right before that week before.
I think I got some stuff going on that week.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us again. Corey LaJoie and Phillip Lewis.
Hope you like the new office setup.
This is Phillip's home office.
My new studio.
You really had some good points today, Phillip.
I know. I usually do.
All right, guys. Till next time.